Hello, everyone. It's your host, your friend, your boy, Jet Black the One and Only, here with another exciting live stream. And in this video, I'm going to be reviewing Superman Man of Tomorrow, issue number 2. In case you aren't aware, DC Comics has recently been releasing a brand new comic each and every day as a part of their DC Digital First expansion. And the latest comic coming at us today is Superman Man of Tomorrow issue 2. If you'd like to see my review of Superman Man of Tomorrow issue number 1, which came out last Monday, definitely make sure to head over to the channel and check out that review. And if you want to pick up a copy of this book for yourself, definitely make sure to look into that description box below. I have an Amazon affiliate link that you can use to not only buy the book yourself, but to actually help support the channel because we get a little bit of the proceeds from the purchase. In this video, I am going to be giving a summary of the comic. I'm also going to tell you what my favorite part was, what my least favorite part was, and I'm going to give a recommendation of who I think would really enjoy this book. So without further ado, let's jump right in with this daily comic review. First, I'll start with the summary. Metropolis City Council is reviewing a bill that will legalize gambling if it is passed, which has many citizens in an uproar. Superman stops an amateur jewelry store robbery and becomes suspicious about how inexperienced the thieves are. Superman does some research and discovers that there are a number of first time criminals popping up recently who all happen to be suffering from money problems. Superman saves a woman from a building that is on fire and notices a woman in the area who is blaming herself for the incident. Superman tries to talk to the woman, but the woman is afraid that he'll report her to the police. Superman then convinces her to talk to his alternate identity, Clark Kent, who is able to interview her and learn what is truly going on. After talking to the woman, he figures out that there are people who are betting on what threat Superman is going to deal with next, and that a villain named the Gambler is extorting those indebted to him to commit crimes to rig the bets in his favor. Superman feels responsible for what is happening and is disheartened by it. He feels as if it's his fault and he doesn't know whether or not he's truly doing the right thing. Lois Lane gives Superman a pep talk and reveals that she's also been investigating the situation and gives him a lead to follow. Following this lead, Superman finds the headquarters of the Gambler and reports the location to the police. He then busts inside and makes easy work of the Gambler's men and corners the Gambler. The Gambler then reveals that he actually is working for a member of the city council who was bribed into trying to approve the pro gambling bill. The city councilman is then arrested for corruption, and the gambling money is returned to those who lost it. And that's pretty much it. That's like the full summary of what happened in the issue. Now I'm going to go over, well, first I'm going to read the live chat. Then I'm going to tell you guys my favorite part of the story, my least favorite part of the story, and who I would recommend this book to. Kaylee said, "Bus in." Yo, Kaylee, welcome to the stream. It's good to have you. Thank you for watching. How's your day today? Yo, Volt, welcome to the stream. It's good to have you as well. Thank you guys for tuning in. How's your day today, you guys? Do you have any questions for your boy? And do you have any discussion topics you'd like to talk about on the stream? Volt said, "The Gambler sounds like a douche." He is a douche. He's like a very normal douche. We were expecting the Gambler to be like some kind of supervillain that already existed who was using like the Gambler as like an alias. But then when we actually read the comic, we were like, oh, he's just a new guy. And all he does is rig bets on superhero stuff, which was very anticlimactic. But we'll get to that in a little bit. First, let me talk about my favorite part of the book. So I actually really enjoyed the pep talk that Lois Lane gave to Superman to help lift his spirits. If there's one thing that Superman Man of Tomorrow does consistently well, it is having characters present inspiring speeches. Lois's speech is more or less about how we can make the world a better place as long as we all return the good favors that we receive from others. So I thought that was really cool. Volt said, "My day's going good. How about you, man?" Oh, fantastic as always. Thank you for asking. It's always good to have you guys here. I hope you guys are enjoying the show so far. So now that I've gone over my favorite part of the book, it's time for me to go into my least favorite part of the book. So my least favorite part of the book is that Superman isn't really challenged this entire book. He fights regular criminals with regular guns who can't really do anything to stop him. This book is a more grounded Superman story than the first issue was, where he fights Parasite. But I'm personally not a big fan of grounded Superman stories. I prefer seeing him have to strategically overcome challenges presented by his opponents. Now, Superman does get disheartened in this book. He has like an emotional challenge to overcome. But to be honest, this doesn't sound like a Superman story. This sounds like a Lois Lane story. Because in the end, Superman's research and trying to figure out what's going on didn't really matter like at all. Because Lois Lane not only helps him overcome the emotional challenge that he had in order to get him back in high spirits and ready to solve the case, Lois Lane also is the one who gives him the lead, which allows him to find the gambler in the first place. To be honest, if you remove Superman from the story, you legitimately could have had Lois Lane investigate the case. She finds out where the gambler's headquarters is. She tells the police, and then the police arrest the gambler. Like, you don't have to have Superman in the story at all, and you could still tell the story. So it just didn't feel like a Superman book to me. So that's my least favorite part of it. I didn't really like that. Now it's time for me to share my recommendation. But first, let me look back at the live chat. Oh, there's nothing new in the live chat. Back to the recommendation. Okay. So, for my recommendation, I would say anyone who enjoys a grounded Superman story about Superman facing off against like run of the mill criminals, like someone who likes seeing a superpowered character face off against normal bad guys, then you probably would like Superman Man of Tomorrow issue number 2. Also, if you like stories that are more about like, I guess like society, then you'll probably like this book a little bit more. It just doesn't really feel like a superhero book. Essentially, this book has a problem that last week's Batman book had, where it's so grounded, it's not a superhero book. Like it's just like essentially real life, but there are superheroes in it, kind of thing. So it's weird. But anyways, if you guys have had a chance to read this book yourselves, definitely let me know in the comment section below your thoughts on the book. If you guys haven't read the book, but you guys are interested in picking it up, definitely feel free to click on that link in the description to where you'll be able to buy a copy of the book for yourself on Amazon. And let's talk for a minute in the live chat. Does anyone have any like discussion topics or questions or anything like that that you'd like to discuss? Volt said, that is doing Superman an injustice. His character can really do cool shit, but you are right. It seems very non-Supermanish. Yeah, I agree with that. Like to be honest, the gambler as a concept, I don't even think is like a bad idea. Like someone who makes their money by betting on like what a superhero will do next because it makes the villain and the hero inherently connected. Like there are a lot of stories where where the Joker could kill Batman, but the Joker goes, "I'm not going to kill Batman because I need Batman for me to survive." But that's like a psychological compulsion kind of thing where Joker's like, "I do this because Batman. So if I didn't have Batman, I wouldn't do this." But I feel like the gambler has more of a reason to be like, I actually don't want superheroes to die because I need to bet on superheroes in order to make my money. But I feel like it wouldn't be hard to take a character like the gambler and make him more of a threat. Because in the DC Comics universe, they have all this crazy advanced technology that you could probably buy on the black market if you were rich. And the gambler is rich, like, all they would have had to have done to make this book better, in my opinion, is have it where when Superman breaks into the gambler's headquarters, the gambler says something like, "What do you think I spend my winnings on?" And then have a bunch of like robots or like hired supervillain assassins. Like, you don't even have to change that much about the gambler. Just make him actually use his money to defend his place. And it would have been great. It just would have kind of worked out. Especially since the gambler is a normal criminal operating in Metropolis, which is like the main city of Superman. Who goes to Superman City and isn't prepared for Superman to show up? It just seemed weird. Volt said the gambler feels like more of a Flash villain to me, though. That's interesting. Like the concept of him being a Flash villain. Why? I guess would be my question. Like, why do you think the gambler would be more of a Flash villain than a Superman villain? Because I feel like he would still suffer from like the same kind of problem. I mean, part of it, I guess, is that this gambler story is supposed to be like a mystery. Like, I could see him being more of a Flash villain in the idea that the Flash is a detective and he could be trying to figure out who the gambler is. But I mean, Superman's a reporter. He could have been trying to figure out who the gambler was. You know what I mean? Volt said Flash seems more like the type that would be interesting to see solve the case. I mean, I get where you're coming from, but Superman's supposed to be like that as well, just in a different way. Like, Superman will do like investigative journalism and stuff. Like, he knows how to like break down a case. And really, when we're talking about like DC characters, a lot of members of even just the Justice League are detectives. Like, Martian Manhunter's secret identity is that he's a detective. Green Lantern is a space police officer, and he occasionally has to do detective work. Flash and his secret identity is like a CSI. He does like forensic science stuff, and he's a detective. Batman is like the world's greatest detective in like the DC universe. The Question is just a detective. Like most of them are detectives, and Superman's kind of in that realm as well. Like I think it'd be fine for them to do a detective Superman story. To me, that's not that crazy. But they didn't really do that. They kind of did, but they kind of half-assed it. I don't know. I feel like it could have been better. Maybe if it was more of a detective story. There was no there was no truly earned twist, I guess. Because the only like curveball they throw at you in the story is that when Superman catches the gambler's like, actually, I was being paid by the city councilman because the city councilman actually is the one who's trying to get the gambling stuff going, and he was the real villain the whole time. And I didn't care about that. I felt like that was an unnecessary twist. And all it really did was undermine the gambler as a villain because he's like, actually, I'm just a second stringer, anyways. Um, I wish the gambler was someone who mattered, I guess. Because when we did our look into what comics were going to come out this week, and we read the description for the Superman book, we got hype because we were like, the gambler's probably somebody we know. Like, we were like, oh, it's like an alias of like a real villain. And we were trying to guess like who the real villain would be. But the gambler just ended up being a new villain who's not really that interesting. It's really hard to even call him a villain. The gambler's just a criminal. And nothing the gambler's doing is something that you couldn't do in real life if you replaced betting on Superman with betting on like a star police officer or something. You know, like this seems like a movie that they could make just with normal people with no special effects. Volt said he's basically a kingpin, to be honest. Kinda. Like I do see where you're coming from with that. I feel like that's a fair comparison. Also, no, I normally mute my computer, but I think what happened is that my computer fell asleep, and then when I woke my computer back up, it was like, "Is my volume on? Is my volume on?" But anyways, we're good. But he's kind of a kingpin. Like I kind of see where you're coming from, but then not really, because the city councilman guy is actually the bad guy. So I don't know. It just feels really weird. It makes him to be like a hired supervillain almost, but then still not really. He's still just a criminal. Um, I hope the next Superman book is better. I thought the first issue, excuse me, was better than this issue. So I hope the next issue starts leaning more in the first issue's direction. Like, I'm trying to remember what about the first issue I didn't really like. I didn't like that there was more slice of life moments of like Superman and Lois Lane and like Jimmy Olsen because I felt like they didn't offer anything to the overall plot. Like another thing that I kind of like about Superman is when he's kind of just Superman. I don't really care about his Clark Kent persona that much outside of interactions with his son, but his son isn't even in this book. Like this isn't a book about Superman being a father. At most it dives into like his relationship with Lois Lane a little bit, but that matters a lot more in this issue than it did in the first issue. In the first issue, they introduced this gag where Superman keeps having to throw his suits in alleyways and stuff, but it's causing Lois to constantly have to buy him new suits, and she's annoyed because it's expensive to keep getting suits his size. Like that's kind of funny, I guess. Like, but it doesn't really matter. It's just there. Is that I can't talk. It's just there for levity. You know what I mean? Um, like I feel like if they want to have more character moments between Superman and Lois and Jimmy Olsen, they should try and find ways to make them interesting and more plot focused. But to be honest, I'd be fine if they just didn't really try to do that. If they just stuck with the Superman stuff. But I hope that the next story is a little bit more zany. Maybe throw in a villain like Mr. Mxyzptlk, someone who can do like really crazy stuff. Or make Superman have to fight someone where he has to really like think through his battle. He kind of did that in the first issue against Parasite, but I still thought that the Parasite fight was a little underwhelming. I feel like it could have been better. I guess what I'm looking for is what we got in the Flash last week. Last week's Flash comic was really good, and I felt like the Flash was legitimately pushed to his limits, and he had to like exert himself in order to figure out exactly how to defeat King Shark. It wasn't just like a battle of like brawn, it was more based on strategy. And Superman, I think, was close to that last week, and now is really far from that this week. So I think it could be better. So I'm not gonna say that this book was like trashed here or anything. Um, I say that and then I pause for a moment and I was like, maybe actually, because last week's book that had like a similar setup where it was like super grounded ended up being D tier, and I'm like, ooh, is this like a D tier book? I'd probably put this around C or D. It may not be D. I mean, I don't think it was like the worst story ever, but I mean, D isn't even the worst, but it's probably C or D, I think. If I had to like prematurely rank it. But it's hard to rank it against books that haven't come out yet. So we'll have to see. Volt said Wonder Woman might do better than this one this week. It hopefully will, because the Wonder Woman book, which is supposed to come out Wednesday, is going to be Wonder Woman and Lois Lane teaming up to save a group of female mountain climbers who are trapped on a mountain with what appears to be Yetis. So it seems like it's going to be Wonder Woman fighting Yetis, which sounds kind of cool, right? Like, oh man, I want to see Wonder Woman fighting these like dope monsters. But at the same time, I'm like, why is Lois Lane in the book? Why is she teaming up with Lois Lane? There are so many more interesting female characters that you could pick from who would fit the theme, where you'd be like, oh, I understand why Wonder Woman would go with like ice or Killer Frost, or maybe even the opposite spectrum, like fire, someone who could maybe keep her warm during the thing. Like, who knows? But Lois Lane? Why? She shouldn't be there. There are Yetis. It just seems weird. Um, so hopefully Wonder Woman will be better than this book. If Wonder Woman's not better than this Superman book, then Wonder Woman will probably end up being D or F tier. So we'll see. Because this book this is a pretty low bar, I think, for other books to do better than. So we'll figure out what book will triumph by the end of this week. I know I'm hyped for Flash, which is coming out this Friday, I'm pretty sure. So I'm hyped for Flash. And to be honest, I think the Flash's description was the only one that really stood out at me this week. Because Aquaman's description involves like a superhero team I'd never really heard of before. And I'm not really excited about Aquaman teaming up with the Sea Devils, who are like a normal group of adventurers who like scuba dive and stuff like that. Because that sounds almost like it's getting to like grounded Aquaman territory, but they are going to be fighting a giant sea monster. So that's probably going to be cool, like seeing them fight the giant sea monster. And it's definitely going to be action packed. But the Sea Devils? It's another one where I'm like, why are they pairing them up with these like weirder characters that don't have a lot of potential to do anything cool? You know what I mean? Batman, that's coming out tomorrow, he's going to be going up against Clayface. That's a big name villain who's kind of larger than life. I guess I'm excited for the Batman story. That one had a lot of intrigue in its description because it's like the villain's going to be in two places at once, and the victim may not be as innocent as they seem. So, I mean, that sounds cool. The Batman one, I guess, the Batman one and the Flash one have the most hype. I'm excited for Flash because it's like an assassin from the future comes back in time to kill the Flash because of something he does in the present that ruins her timeline. And the Flash has to figure out how he can prevent that from happening. I'm like, that's cool. That sounds like it has a little bit of detective stuff in it because Flash has to figure out exactly like what he caused in the future and figure out a way to stop it. Um, and I imagine the future assassin is going to have a bunch of like high tech gadgets and stuff like that are going to challenge the Flash and his super speed abilities. Like it just sounds like an interesting story. Let's see. Volt said, I'm waiting for the next Swamp Thing one. So Swamp Thing last week was really good. Swamp Thing was like an S rank book. That's where I put it in the weekly tier list. But the Swamp Thing description, I don't even really remember what the description was. I think it was like a one sentence description for what the Swamp Thing book is going to be. And I just remember reading it and just being like, I don't really have a lot to go off of. Like, I don't know what it's about. I think the description was like, Swamp Thing runs into like an old friend and there's some other thing. And that's about it. Kaylee said, what do you know about the Swamp Thing? So do you want me to tell you what I know about the character Swamp Thing? Or do you want me to tell you what I know about the book that's coming out this Sunday? Like the latest issue of Swamp Thing? Or do you want me to tell you about like the Swamp Thing story so far? Because there's only been like one issue. Kaylee said, yeah, the character. Um, the Swamp Thing character I know is like a scientist. I'm pretty sure his name is like Alec or something like that. Like it starts with an A. Um, he falls into a swamp and there's like a bunch of magic stuff that happens that binds him to the green. And the green in the DC universe represents like plant life and nature and stuff like that. So he kind of becomes like the avatar of nature. So he's this giant plant monster man. And because of his innate connection to the natural world, he wants to protect it. So he's kind of more of like an environmentalist superhero. But he also has a horror like monster aesthetic. Like he's very creepy looking, and the way that he goes about fighting crime can sometimes look more like a horror adventure. You know what I mean? Like he'll raise from the earth behind people and loom over them. He'll like grab them with vines and like restrain them and stuff like that. Like it's stuff that does just seem kind of creepy. Like Swamp Thing is the kind of character that I would recommend people who are into horror and into monsters and stuff like that would check out. Kaylee said, "Oh, interesting." She said, "I've been wanting to watch Return of the Swamp Thing." Return of the Swamp Thing. Do 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 dun, 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 do, 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 do. It's a 1989 film. Do 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 do. It came out on my birthday in 1989, but it didn't come out on DVD until 2003. And the screenplay was written by Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison is one of my favorite comic book authors. Kaylee said the director I work with was in it. Interesting. Huh. I've never seen Return of the Swamp Thing. I think it's interesting that it came out on my birthday, though. It looks kind of like a B movie. Also, the poster for the Return of the Swamp Thing says America's favorite superhero is back in action. He's not America's favorite superhero. That's that's a really big claim. Oh, the movie is a comedy horror superhero film? Ah, what a weird. I wouldn't go that way for Swamp Thing. That's very weird. Okay. And it's the Return of the Swamp Thing? So it's like a sequel? It's a sequel to the 1982 film Swamp Thing. Was that also a comedy horror movie? That one's just a superhero horror film. That sounds cool. It was directed by Wes Craven. That name sounds familiar, but I don't know what the fuck he did. Um, that name sounds really familiar. What did Wes Craven do? Let me look at his filmography. The Last House on the Left, I've seen that. The Fireworks Woman, haven't seen that. The Hills Have Eyes, I think I saw like a remake of that. Deadly Blessing, nope. Swamp Thing, nope. The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, I didn't know there was more than one of that. Nightmare on Elm Street, haven't seen that. Deadly Friend, don't know what that is. Another Nightmare on Elm Street, The Serpent and the Rainbow, never heard of that. Shocker, never heard of that. The People Under the Stairs, I liked that. That was pretty good. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie. I kind of forgot about it, but I liked that. Wes Craven's New Nightmare, haven't heard of that. Let's see. Kaylee said, "Hey, nice. Would you want to watch it on a Tuesday when the quarantine is over?" I'm more interested in the first Swamp Thing than the second Swamp Thing. To me, it seems really weird that the first Swamp Thing movie is an it's like a horror superhero movie. I'm like, that's what it should be. I'm like, that fits him. And then the second one is a comedy horror superhero movie. Like, I almost want to watch the first one and then the second one. Because I think it's really interesting for a horror movie to later get a sequel that's a comedy. Because that's what the Child's Play films did. Because, like, the first Child's Play movie is admittedly silly at parts, but it's supposed to be more serious. And then later Child's Play movies are, like, kind of goofier and wackier. Like, they up the ante on the silly factor. Let's see. Kaylee said, "Lol, he was America's favorite superhero on May 12th." Kaylee said, "The People Under the Stairs sounds interesting." It was. I remember liking that movie. Kaylee said, "What if we watch both and compare them?" I'd be down for that. I think that'd be fun. One thing that I'm going to have to start doing, because once the quarantine's over, I still want to keep doing these daily reviews. I might start doing the daily reviews during the friend hangouts at some point. Like I may try to read the comic before you guys get here. And maybe I guess if I can review the comic before you guys get here, that would also work. I'm not sure if I'd have enough time to do that. But would you guys be interested in sitting in on those reviews sometimes? I probably wouldn't do them for half an hour if you guys were here. They'd probably be more concise. Um, but I'm trying to figure out how my schedule would go. Volt said quarantine feels like it will never end. Well, at least in the meantime, we can spend it together. Together. Also, I'm about to end the stream. I'm about to work on some more Heart of Heroes Volume 4, which, by the way, I've been very hype on. I recently introduced a new species. The character Ejat has been like further developed. So he has like new abilities and stuff. There's a sequel story to the AI Dungeon 2 story. I think I've already mentioned that before. A lot of cool stuff coming up. So I hope you guys are hyped for that. Kaylee said we could come later, and then Kaylee said, "I know Volt." Um, I don't know. I don't know. I understand where you're coming from with the come later thing. Um, I might be able to try and get the reviews in earlier. It depends on how soon DC wants to not review, release these books. Because last night at like 11:30, DC dropped this Superman book, which wasn't supposed to come out until the next day. And I was like, yo, I could like read and review this book before bed. And I did, and it allowed me to have this review ready earlier than I thought I'd be able to, because I already had the review written. So if they keep doing that, I may be able to make a part of my nightly routine every day, except I guess the AI Dungeon 2 days, because then I couldn't read it early. Then I could try and review it each day a little bit earlier. But we'll see. Anyways, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Volt. Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day today. Stay tuned. At 8 p.m. Central Daylight Time, I am going to do a Trials of Mana remake stream. And then at 9 p.m. Central Daylight Time, I'm going to do a writing vlog. So if you guys are hyped for that, thank you all for tuning in. If you guys like this video, make sure to smash that like button, favorite, comment, subscribe, and ding, 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 ring the notification bell to be notified whenever we do these live streams. As your friend, your boy, Jet Black the one only, logging out. Peace, guys. Check the guy.